Well, well, well. The Singapore Grand Prix. In my opinion, there's quite a lot of issues that I want to go through today. Things that happened that perhaps shouldn't have happened, things that went wrong, things that we need to change for the future. I want to go through them. But before we do that, let's start with some positives. Awesome drive by Sergio Perez. Easily his best win of his career, arguably the drive of his career. Drove out of his skin, made basically no mistakes at all. In really tricky conditions, the longest, hottest, hardest race of the year in wet, dry conditions. Also, special shout out as well to Charles Leclerc, similar sort of thing. Lost contact with Sergio Perez at the end there, but he made very few mistakes as well. And also Lando Norris, should give a key shout out to those two guys. But take nothing away from those guys. Awesome drive. And I tell you what, it was awesome to watch them. At the end there, I actually tweeted out how cool it was to see the video work, the camera work that was going on, because the cars were swerving around. There was little grip, and I don't know, it all just looked fast and hard, and it made it look so impressive to be driving those cars, which was absolutely awesome to see. But there's a few issues I want to go through about the Singapore Grand Prix. First of all, let's start from the beginning, shall we? It was delayed by an hour because of rain. However, when they delayed it, it wasn't raining anymore. Don't get me wrong, I think an account called F1 Broadcast and tweeted out that basically there'll be a formal start procedure that they would like to run through in its entirety, because there's probably actually contracts with the track. There's contracts between F1 and the track. That is the formal start procedure they need to run through. Things like the national anthem and getting celebrities on the grid. It's all part of the show as far as Singapore promotion is concerned. Fair enough, okay? So let's just assume they have to run through the full 40-minute or so procedure from the pit lane opening to the race starting. Absolutely fine, so they can't do it quicker than that. Also fair enough that they delayed it initially, because when they initially said it was going to be delayed, the rain was absolutely torrential. But at the point where the race was due to start, it had stopped raining. Now, the track may have still been too wet at that point, but at that point, all they said to the teams was, we'll give you a 10-minute notice of proceedings starting. They decided to give a over 30-minute notice of proceedings startings. So at the very least, the absolute minimum the FIA should have done was made the start procedure 20 minutes quicker, and then maybe we would have started on full wet tyres and had a transition to inters, made it a bit more interesting. Instead, we see once again, we can't race because it's too rainy. But when we eventually get racing, they'll be straight on the intermediate tyres. What is the point in the full wet tyres, please, in F1? Don't get me wrong, safety is obviously paramount. They shouldn't start too early, spray would be crazy, etc, etc, etc. But start on the inters is just crazy. That's just typical F1. That needs to change. Talking more generally, though, for me, stinker of a race. In theory, it should have been a great race. And that is my issue, is that was peak Singapore Grand Prix. We had changeable weather conditions. We had genuinely really difficult driving conditions. It was a genuine challenge for the drivers. As I said, Sergio Perez, absolutely epic race from him. Honestly, it should have been way up there, all the drama. And for me, it was still like a 3 out of 10 race. I'm a big F1 fan. I enjoy Monaco Grand Prix to some extent, because I like watching the cars go round. I like watching the driver's skill. But the first 2/3 of the race were just absolutely horrific. Nothing happened. Not a good race at all. And that is as good as it's going to get. It's never going to get better than that around the Singapore Grand Prix track. They can't overtake. Overtaking is not the be all and end all, but Monaco is more special because Monaco is tighter and more historic and just more interesting, I think. Whereas Singapore, it's the walls are close, sure, but other than that, it's not that tight. It's not that challenging. There's no corners that you're like, oh wow, right on the limit through there. Surely anyone who's ever called for the Monaco Grand Prix to be scrapped is also calling for the Singapore Grand Prix to be scrapped. Let's add to that. Let's put in another thing into the Singapore pie. It was a night race, okay? It was the first ever night race. Awesome, interesting, makes it different. Fine with that. However, when it rains, because it's so humid out there, it never dries up. We need to cut out some races. Singapore can get in the bin. Monaco, in my opinion, keep. I know that might be controversial. Bear in mind I'm asking for Singapore to get rid of, but that was peak. It was peak Singapore, and it was rubbish. Get it out of my sight. Go away. No more Singapore. Let's talk about the start incident between Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. So, on the apex of turn 1, he was absolutely wheel to wheel with Carlos Sainz. Now, I know it's lap 1. I like to give a bit more leeway for lap 1 because there's more drama going to happen. But then Sainz just shoves him off, and then Hamilton loses his position. And then subsequently, Hamilton spends the entire race behind Carlos Sainz, who was having a shocker of a race, by the way. Terrible race from Carlos Sainz. And Hamilton was just stuck there because you can't overtake around the Singapore Grand Prix, even in the wet. And there was no incident. I think F1 needs to introduce a new penalty. I think F1 needs to learn from MotoGP. There was a MotoGP race this morning in Thailand. There was a couple of things that MotoGP did better. First of all, they did a quick start procedure. They actually said, oh, the race is delayed. And I mean, they'd already done the grid procedure at this point, but they said the race is delayed. And I kid you not, within 5, maybe 10 minutes, the race was underway. After announcing it was delayed. F1 is never that fast. That was awesome to see. And also, they've got a penalty in MotoGP, which is drop 1 position. Now, they used that, actually. The leader of the race at the time, he essentially went off. He actually ended up doing the opposite Hamilton, and he gained an advantage by going off the track and ended up staying in the lead. So they gave him a penalty of drop 1 position. F1 needs to introduce that, in my opinion. F1 needs to introduce drop 1 position. Because I think Carlos Sainz shouldn't have got away with that at the start. Hamilton was wheel to wheel, deserved the room, Sainz shoved him off. I don't care if it's the start, he deserves some room there. Otherwise, you're setting a precedent for in the future. It doesn't matter if you're wheel to wheel. If it's the start, just shove him off anyway, it doesn't matter. Obviously, if Hamilton gets damage from it, there should be more severe penalty. But assuming exactly what happened. If Hamilton's dropped further positions, that's on him. Sainz, though, his punishment for shoving another driver off the track and effectively staying ahead of that driver without getting overtaken is to lose a position, irrelevant of which driver it is. That's his punishment. It is a hard line to draw on the start, but they were absolutely wheel to wheel at the apex. I just don't feel like you can just shove someone off. It's a massive advantage to be gained. I thought Hamilton was perfectly within his rights to be there, and he's get shoved off. That is what it is. Safety car restarts. Now, the official rule behind the safety car is all cars must stay within 10 car lengths of the car in front. That involves the leading car to the safety car and then every car behind him. So when Sergio Perez was leading, Sergio Perez should always stay within 10 car lengths of the safety car, and Charles Leclerc just behind him should stay within 10 car lengths of Sergio Perez, etc, etc, etc. Now, this is a rule that has been ignored for a long, long time. Essentially, what they do instead is, because they want to get their rear tyres warmed up and their brakes warmed up, what they do is they back off, they floor the throttle so they get a bit of, not necessarily wheel spin, but, get the rear wheels a bit more fired up to get the rear tyre temperatures up. Then they slam on the brakes again to get the brake temperatures warmed up, which also then in turn warms the wheels up and warms the tyres up. So that's what they do. But I think they've just gone way too far with it, and it's just gone too far. They either need to scrap the rule, make it a different rule, or police it, because otherwise there is no rule. Now, the issue today is Sergio Perez is currently under investigation. Race winner Sergio Perez is under investigation for an incident that happened, 20 laps before the end of the race? They decided not to investigate it in the race, which is obviously ridiculous, and say no till after the race. Obviously, that's insane. We're now going, did Perez win? Should he be on the top step of the podium? Should he be celebrating? Look, another issue. I'm not even going to get into that right now. But the safety car issues in general, I believe he's under investigation for falling more than 10 car lengths back from the safety car. Now, how the safety car restart procedure works, for those that don't know, is the safety car has flashing lights on top of it, which means, it's a safety car, stay within 10 car lengths of the safety car. When the safety car is ending, they switch off those lights, and when the lights go off, at that point, the leading F1 car becomes the safety car. But that's the rule. Now, I believe what happened is the safety car hadn't switched the safety car lights off yet, but Sergio Perez started dropping back. So essentially, he just did it a bit too early. Now, I believe the reason they've said we'll investigate it after the race is because everybody was dropping more than 10 car lengths back. How do you penalise Sergio Perez for dropping more than 10 car lengths behind the safety car if you're not going to penalise Charles Leclerc for dropping more than 10 car lengths for Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz for dropping more than 10 car lengths behind Charles Leclerc? In my opinion, they have to penalise every single other driver. And then do you penalise it per safety car period? Do you penalise it every single time they drop more than 10 car lengths back? Because in which case, basically everyone's disqualified. Everyone gets a 10-minute penalty. Oh, DRS, Kevin. Yes, there you go. There's another good talking point. Let's talk about DRS. Where was it today? Where the hell was it? Now, we started without DRS, okay? There's already DRS in the wet. It's because it's not so safe to have DRS open in the wet conditions. Absolutely fine. Normally what happens is when it dries up, they enable DRS. That's not necessarily linked to the slick tyres, as it normally is in video games. It's linked to safety, to the conditions. So we have seen it multiple times, cars on intermediate tyres with the DRS open. Today was a shock for race. We needed DRS. The FIA should not factor that in. I'm absolutely clear about that. I never liked that Michael Massey used to do things more for the show than for the core rules and safety of the sport, which is exactly what we saw in Abu Dhabi. And if Michael Massey wasn't race director, we probably would have seen a different championship result last season. Say no more on that. There definitely did come a point where it appeared almost completely dry. In fact, George Russell was out there on slick tyres. Okay, he wasn't very fast, but he wasn't shockingly off the pace. The FIA's reasoning for this was that it was still quite wet at the end of the long straight, which you saw. And I actually think Max Verstappen skating off on that particular corner is essentially why they didn't enable it. For me, though, that doesn't matter. I still think they made the wrong decision. If it was really wet down that end, okay. So in which case then maybe introduce a new rule that allows them to enable DRS in certain zones, not all the zones at once, because the other two zones were definitely fine. The only alternative would be to say we're going to throw permanent yellow flags in this sector because there's a bit of water. Obviously not. Controversial statement, because the FIA should prioritise safety above all else, but I actually think the FIA prioritise safety a bit too much at the moment. I think they go too far in that they almost make sure everyone's too safe, and it doesn't need to be that. If you reduce the safety a little bit, it's actually still perfectly safe. And I'm not exaggerating when I say perfectly safe. It's never perfect, but you know what I mean. It would make no difference, for example, I believe, in terms of safety, if you enable the DRS 5, maybe even 10 laps sooner than they did. So yeah, bit of a weird one that they had it disabled for so long. I think they were just too obsessed with, almost covering their own backs and making sure they didn't cause their own safety car. So yeah, it's what it is on that one. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, hopefully you enjoyed this. I will try and do more of these in the future, ideally with people as well in the future and a bit more structure to it. I do like talking about it. For me, though, when it's just a boring race and nothing really happened, like to sit here and talk for an hour about nothing, I don't know. However, in races like the Singapore Grand Prix, when there's a lot of talking points, I think we'll do these in the future. I'll just try and bring a bit more structure next time, whereby I've actually got a list of talking points and I can actually get them up on screen rather than just watching my face. But at least you've got, obviously, the chat over here. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.